Kirk Miller stood stunned in the flickering fluorescent light of the rec center, the basketball still spinning from Dale Peterson's brutal block. His shot had been swatted back with such force it hit his own face, sending him sprawling. Laughter erupted. Dale, leaning over him, wiped a casual hand on his shorts. "Maybe stick to watching, old man," he smirked, the words cutting deeper than the actual blow. The order from Belvoir had come down without preamble, a terse notification that Kirk's training was to conclude ahead of schedule. "Routine reassignment," the sergeant had said, not quite meeting his eyes. He packed his duffel, the weight of his gear feeling heavier than usual. The drive home along the familiar interstate was a blur of gray asphalt and barren fields. His thoughts churned, a vague unease settling in his chest. Routine. It didn't feel routine. Then, there he was, Dale Peterson. Dale's lifted Chevy truck, polished to a chrome gleam, passed him on the left, then slowed to match his speed. Dale leaned over, arm resting on the doorframe, a pioneer's unsettling smirk plastered across his face. He nodded almost imperceptibly, his gaze lingering a moment too long before he pressed the accelerator and vanished into the autumn haze. A cold knot tightened in Kirk's gut, a premonition he couldn't shake. Dale shouldn't have been on this road, not at this time. He pulled into the driveway, the gravel crunching under his tires, an unwelcome sound. The front door was ajar. Inside, the house smelled of fresh soap and something sweet like cinnamon. Brenda Hayes emerged from the bathroom, hair damp, wrapped in a thick terry cloth robe, a towel draped over her head. She looked surprised, then a little too composed. "Kirk, what are you doing home so early?" Her voice was steady, perhaps a touch too much. Kirk stood by the coat rack, his duffel bag still slung over his shoulder, feeling the strain in his muscles. The words caught in his throat, a dry scrape. He cleared it. "They sent me back. Something about routine." He paused. "Why are you home?" Brenda pulled the towel from her head, shaking out her dark hair. "Oh, I had lunch with Dale. We just got back." She said it so casually as if mentioning a trip to the grocery store. He had some business in town. The ground beneath Kirk's feet seemed to dissolve. Lunch with Dale. Just got back. The words echoed, cold and clear. He felt his legs give out, a sudden unfamiliar weakness. He sank to his knees, the linoleum cold against his jeans, his duffel bag thudding softly beside him. He closed his eyes, trying to make sense of the racing thoughts. Brenda was there, her hands on his shoulders, her voice a low murmur. "Kirk, what is it?" "It's nothing, really, don't worry." Her touch felt distant, her words hollow. He wanted to believe her, to push away the image of Dale's smirk, but it clung to him. She continued, trying to explain. "He was just here for a minute. You know those Navy SEAL guys, always playing mind games. That smirk? That's just Dale trying to get a rise out of people." He opened his eyes, looking up at her. He wanted to tell her, to plead with her, to not let Dale Peterson come to their home, to ignore his calculated provocations. But the words remained trapped, unspoken, heavy in the silence between them. He simply nodded, a slow, strained movement, trying to force a semblance of understanding into his face. Later that week, Connie, a friend from his old unit, found him nursing a cold coffee at the diner down on Elm Street. She slid into the booth opposite him, her gaze sharp, taking in the lines of worry etched around his eyes. "You look like you've seen a ghost, Kirk." He pushed his half-empty mug across the table. "Worse." He recounted Brenda's casual admission, Dale's unsettling smirk on the highway, the way Brenda had dismissed it all, the way he couldn't shake the feeling of something being profoundly wrong. "It just doesn't add up, Connie." The way she said it, the way she didn't seem to care that Dale was in our house, alone with her. Connie stirred her own coffee, watching the steam curl. "Brenda isn't into Dale, Kirk, trust me. It's probably just a coincidence. Dale's always been a loudmouth." "Her actions don't match her words," Kirk insisted, a quiet desperation in his voice. He felt helpless, caught in a current he couldn't fight. Connie leaned forward, her voice dropping, almost a whisper. "There's something important you don't know, Kirk. Something big. By this time next week, you'll understand everything." Her eyes held a deep, unreadable sadness. The following Sunday, Brenda was bustling around the house, meticulously planning a huge Halloween party, a family affair. She spoke of costume ideas, pumpkin carvings, and a special brunch for the extended family on Sunday. She mentioned, almost as an aside, that he would be leaving before the main family event. Then, with a bright smile, she handed him a brochure. A gift, she said. It was an arrangement for him to go to a specialized hunting retreat, fun activities, she'd called it, during the family brunch. You'll enjoy this much more than sitting around with my aunts and uncles, she'd insisted, her tone light, but his stomach tightened with a familiar unease. It felt less like a gift and more like an exile. The sun was still low, painting the sky in a bruised purple, when I started stringing lights. Brenda had a vision for this Halloween party, a full spectacle. I lugged boxes of decorations from the garage, untangled strands of orange and purple bulbs, and wrestled with the collapsible frame of the outdoor tent. Sweat beaded on my forehead, stinging my eyes, but I pushed through it, wanting to make her happy, wanting to be a good partner. I'd even arranged a spa day for Brenda and Connie, a small gesture to thank them for their patience with my early return, a moment of pampering before the storm of guests. By mid-afternoon, the house was a hive of activity. Vans idled in the driveway, disgorging trays of food and uniformed caterers. A team from a local valet service was already setting up cones, ready to guide cars down our long cul-de-sac. Two men in dark suits, Brenda's private security, stood near the entrance, their eyes scanning the property with quiet efficiency. It was all Brenda's doing, an orchestration far beyond anything I would have planned. The scale of it was impressive, almost daunting. As dusk began to settle, Brenda came into the bedroom where I was wrestling with my costume. She held a small bag of makeup. "Let me," she said, her fingers light as she dabbed a little stage blood near my temple for my zombie soldier outfit. Her touch was soft, familiar. "This is going to be wonderful, Kirk. I want to start a tradition, you know? Big annual parties. Get everyone together." Her eyes sparkled with a kind of manic energy. She rattled off the guest list like a roll call. Over 100 relatives, her cousins from Ohio, her aunts and uncles, neighbors from 2 streets over, her co-workers from the firm, even a few faces I recognized from my battalion. "It's a mix," she explained, gesturing with the makeup brush. "Everyone needs to see what a great life we're building." Then her voice dropped slightly, taking on a more conspiratorial tone. "And remember your special plans for tomorrow, honey. That hunting trip. It's my little gift to you. The family brunch on Sunday can get a bit dull. You'd rather be out there having fun, right? My family can be a lot." She smiled, but the smile didn't quite reach her eyes. It was a reaffirmation of my exclusion, framed as a thoughtful gesture. The party kicked off with a bang. Music thumped through the floorboards. The air filled with the scent of spiced cider and roasted meats. Laughter and chatter spilled out onto the lawn, mixing with the crackle of a bonfire Brenda had insisted on. I moved through the throng, shaking hands, introducing myself. Brenda's family was overwhelming in their warmth, a sprawling network of uncles with booming laughs and aunts who pinched my cheeks. "Brenda picked a wonderful one cousin slurred, clapping me on the shoulder. "You're good for her, Kirk." I felt a flicker of pride, a sense of belonging I hadn't realized I craved. Then, he was there, Dale Peterson. He arrived late, as if on purpose, slipping in through the back gate unnoticed by the security detail, or perhaps they simply let him pass. He was dressed as a pirate, a flamboyant sash tied around his waist, a plastic cutlass tucked into it. His eyes, though, were serious, scanning the room. They settled on Brenda, then on me, a quick, almost imperceptible assessment. A prickle ran down my spine, a cold sensation like a draft through an open window. I tried to shake it off, plastering a host's smile on my face. This was my home. I was a good man doing my duty. Brenda was beside me, laughing, her arm linked through mine, her happiness almost too bright, too carefully constructed. But then, across the sea of costumed faces, I saw it. Dale, leaning against the kitchen island, his pirate hat slightly askew. Brenda, mid-conversation with her aunt, her head turned just so. Their eyes met. A brief, knowing glance, a flicker that lasted no more than a second. But it was enough. It was a secret language I didn't understand, and it made my stomach clench into a tight knot. Connie, dressed as a benevolent witch, appeared beside me, nudging my arm. Her eyes met mine, a quiet, somber look that said, clear as day, remember what I told you. I nodded, a small, almost imperceptible movement. As the night wore on, fueled by cheap beer and simmering anxiety, I tried to keep Dale in my sight. But the house was too big, the crowd too dense. He was a phantom, appearing and disappearing, his pirate hat a fleeting glimpse in the strobe lights. Guests began to thin out around midnight. Brenda, her smile still wide, took my arm. Time for you to get some rest, honey. Big day tomorrow, remember? Your special plans. She steered me gently toward the door, her touch firm, pushing me out into the cool night air. The dread was quiet but undeniable. I was being sent away, excluded from something I was beginning to realize was far more significant than a family brunch. The Fun Activities House was a quaint, Victorian-style place, tucked away on a tree-lined street a few towns over. It was decorated for Halloween, with carved pumpkins glowing on the porch and fake cobwebs draped over the bushes. I tried to immerse myself in the pre-arranged itinerary, a clay pigeon shoot, a guided tour of a local vineyard, a whiskey tasting. The instructors were friendly, the other guests jovial, but my mind kept drifting. Every sharp report of the shotgun, every swirl of aged bourbon in my glass only brought me back to Brenda, to the party, to Dale Peterson. I pulled out my phone during a break, my thumb hovering over Brenda's contact. I needed to hear her voice, to confirm that everything was fine, that my unease was just residual stress from work. The phone rang 3 times, then clicked. Her voicemail. Hey, it's Brenda. Leave a message. Her recorded voice sounded bright, carefree. I cleared my throat, trying to inject a cheerful lightness into my own tone. Hey, honey, just checking in, having fun. Hope the brunch is going great. Miss you. Call me later. The words felt hollow as they left my lips. Hours crawled by. The whiskey tasting finished. The sun climbed higher, then began its slow descent. The forced camaraderie, the polite laughter, all of it felt like thin veneer over a growing hollowness inside me. The fun was a pretense, an elaborate distraction that failed to distract. A cold dread, a gut feeling I couldn't ignore, tightened its grip. Something was wrong. I knew it with a certainty that transcended logic. This gift felt less like an indulgence and more like an elaborate ruse. I had to go home. I found a quiet corner and discreetly called a rideshare. The car arrived quickly, a silent, unassuming sedan. The driver was a young man with earbuds in, oblivious to the turmoil churning inside me. The ride back felt endless, the familiar landscape blurring past the window. I kept checking the time, arriving much earlier than Brenda could have possibly anticipated. The house was quiet when the car pulled up, the engine idling for a moment before the driver pulled away. Too quiet. No lingering hum of party chatter, no distant music. The valet service was gone. The caterers' vans, the private security personnel, all of them had vanished. Only the remnants of the party remained. Discarded plastic cups on the lawn, a few deflated balloons clinging to the porch light, the faint, sweet scent of stale beer. I walked up the pathway, my heart thumping a frantic rhythm against my ribs. The back door, the one leading into the kitchen, was slightly ajar, just as I had found it the last time, after Dale's initial visit. A wave of profound unease washed over me, cold and heavy. This wasn't right. I pushed the door open, the sound barely audible over the rush in my ears. The kitchen was in disarray, a few dirty dishes in the sink, a half-empty bottle of sparkling cider on the counter. Brenda, I called out, my voice sounding weak, foreign in the silence. No answer. I walked through the living room, past the crumpled streamers and scattered confetti, then the dining room, calling her name again, a little louder this time. The only reply was the hollow echo of my own voice. I reached the bedroom door. It was partially closed. My hand trembled as I pushed it open. The sight that greeted me froze the blood in my veins. The world tilted on its axis, every carefully constructed belief, every reassurance Brenda had ever given me, every dismissive comment about Dale crashing down in a deafening roar. There they were. Dale Peterson, half-dressed, caught mid-movement as he scrambled to cover himself, his swagger replaced by a momentary naked panic. Brenda Hayes, entangled in the sheets, her eyes wide, her face a mask of shock and shame. The intimate aftermath of their betrayal was undeniable, painted across the rumpled bed, in the discarded clothes on the floor, in the desperate scramble to hide. "Kirk," she whispered, her voice a raw, broken sound, barely audible. The air in the bedroom was thick and suffocating, the scent of sex and betrayal a cloying presence. I stood there, utterly frozen, the image of them, tangled and exposed, branded onto the inside of my eyelids. A guttural sound, something like a primal scream struggling to break free, hitched in my throat, but only a low, animal growl escaped. My hands clenched into fists, nails digging into my palms. Dale Peterson, caught off guard, scrambled, fumbling for his discarded clothes. He tried to move past me, but I stepped in his path, my body a rigid barrier. My eyes, I knew, were blazing. All the suppressed rage, the unease, the nagging suspicion coalesced into a cold, furious certainty. "Get out!" I snarled, the words raw, tearing at my throat. My voice was shaking with a cold fury I barely recognized as my own. "Get out of my house, now!" Brenda, her face streaked with tears, lurched forward, reaching for me. "Kirk, please, let me explain." I pushed her away, gently but firmly, my hand making brief, unwelcome contact with her arm. The touch felt alien, contaminated. "Don't touch me," I said, the words cutting through the air like razor wire. My gaze stayed fixed on Dale. Dale, his face pale, gathered his scattered clothes with frantic haste. His eyes darted between my unyielding stance and the open door, a flicker of fear in their depths, quickly replaced by a desperate, almost defiant resolve. He dressed clumsily, pulling on his pirate pants, then his shirt, his movements jerky and hurried. He didn't meet my gaze directly, but as he finally made it to the doorway, he paused, turning his head slightly. His eyes found mine, a brief, unsettling glance that held a strange mix of contempt and pity before he slipped out of the room, leaving the door ajar. The click of the front door closing echoed through the silent house, a final damning punctuation mark. I turned back to Brenda, my face devoid of warmth, my eyes, I imagined, as cold and hard as stone. She was sitting on the edge of the bed, her hands covering her face, her shoulders shaking with silent sobs. "Tell me," I demanded, my voice low, dangerous, barely a whisper but cutting through the air. "Tell me everything." She collapsed back onto the rumpled sheets, her body racked with sobs, unable to meet my gaze. It, it meant nothing, Kirk. I swear, it was a mistake. Just a moment of weakness. You were gone and—" Her words were flimsy, transparent. I listened, my face impassive, as she tried to construct a narrative of fleeting indiscretion. But the edifice of her lies crumbled under the weight of memory. Every suspicious moment replayed in my mind. Dale's smirk on the highway, Brenda's too calm demeanor, the casual mention of lunch, Connie's pointed warnings, the knowing glance across the party. I picked apart her excuses systematically, mercilessly. "A mistake?" I asked, my voice laced with bitter irony. "Was sending me away your gift to me, Brenda? A carefully planned chance for you to be with him? To bring him into our home?" The thought was a searing brand, burning through my chest. Her resistance broke. The sobs intensified, and then, amidst the broken sounds, the truth spilled out, hesitant at first, then a torrent. It had been going on longer. Not just a recent indiscretion, but a sustained, calculated betrayal. The details were vague, mercifully so, but the depth of her involvement with Dale, her quiet admission that it had been on and off for months, felt like a physical blow. Each word twisted the knife deeper, carving out a hollow space where trust and love had once resided. I didn't need to hear any more. The confession, raw and unvarnished, was enough. I turned, my movements stiff, wooden, and walked out of the bedroom, leaving Brenda in her shame, alone in the wreckage of our life. The silence of the house was not empty. It screamed louder than any argument, louder than any accusation. I found myself in the living room, surrounded by the cheerful, discarded remnants of the Halloween party. Streamers hung crookedly, a half-eaten bowl of candy corn sat on the coffee table, a lone pumpkin grinned maniacally from the mantel. They were no longer symbols of celebration, but mocking monuments to a shared life that was now utterly, irretrievably shattered. The couch felt like a slab of concrete. Sleep was a distant, impossible concept. Grafayim, every creak of the house, every rustle of leaves outside, only amplified the heavy blanket of betrayal that suffocated me. The image of Brenda and Dale, stark and undeniable, played on an endless loop behind my eyelids. The digital clock on the cable box glowed red. 4:37 a.m. I picked up my phone, my fingers numb. Connie's name flickered on the screen. I called. Her voice, thick with sleep, answered on the third ring. "Kirk, what's wrong?" "I know," I said, my voice strained, barely a whisper. "I know everything." A long silence stretched between us, punctuated only by the faint crackle of the phone line. I could almost hear her processing the words, the shift from concern to grim understanding. "Oh, Kirk," she finally said, her voice laced with deep regret. She didn't deny it. She didn't even try. She was at my door within 20 minutes, still in her pajamas, a hastily thrown-on coat over them. Her face was etched with a quiet sorrow, her eyes red-rimmed. She stepped inside, looking from me to the closed bedroom door, then back to me. "I suspected, Kirk," she admitted, her voice low. "Brenda swore me to secrecy. She said she was going to tell you." Connie wrung her hands. "She said it was a complicated situation, that she just needed the right time." I scoffed, a short, bitter sound devoid of humor. "A complicated situation? She planned my absence. That's not complicated, Connie. That's calculated." Just then, the bedroom door creaked open. Brenda emerged, her hair disheveled, her eyes swollen and red. She looked distraught, truly heartbroken. She took a tentative step towards me, her hands clasped together. "Kirk, please, let me explain. You have to let me explain." My anger, a cold, unmoving wall, hardened. I shook my head, my gaze fixed on a point just past her shoulder. "There's nothing to explain it, Brenda. I saw it. I heard it. Your explanations mean nothing now." The words were flat, devoid of emotion, a shield against the pain that threatened to consume me. Connie stepped between us, her voice soft, pleading. "Brenda, Kirk, you two have so much history. The good times, remember? You can't just throw it all away." I turned my gaze to Connie, a fresh wave of accusation rising within me. "How long, Connie? How long did you know? Were you a part of this? Were you complicit in her lies?" Connie flinched as if I had struck her. Tears welled in her eyes, finally spilling over. "No, Kirk, not like that. I swear. I only found out the extent recently. I tried to get her to come clean. I told her it wasn't fair to you. That's why I gave you that hint." She gestured helplessly. Brenda, desperate, her voice raw, cut in. "I'll end it, Kirk. Right now, I'll call Dale. Tell him it's over. I'll do whatever it takes. Please, just tell me what you need." She moved towards me again, her hand reaching out. I looked at her, truly looked at her. But all I saw was the woman who had meticulously planned my absence, who had ushered me out the door with a false smile, making arrangements for my fun activities while she orchestrated her betrayal in my own home. The image was burned into my mind, poisoning every memory, every shared laugh, every tender moment. "I need space, Brenda," I said, my voice low and steady. "I can't even look at you right now." I turned, pulled my keys from the hook by the door, and walked out of the house. I didn't look back. The car started with a familiar rumble. I drove aimlessly, letting the wheels guide me through the quiet, pre-dawn Midwestern roads. The cornfields, silvered by the approaching dawn, the sleepy farmhouses, the familiar gas stations. All of it felt foreign, tainted by the raw pain in my chest. The life I thought I had, the future I'd painstakingly built, was crumbling around me, dissolving into dust. The options ahead felt bleak, uncertain. What comes next? The question hung heavy in the air, unanswered, unsettling. Stick around to the end to see how life's costly choices unfold. Days bled into weeks. The sterile walls of the small, rented apartment felt like a temporary holding cell compared to the warmth of the home Brenda and I had built. Every morning I woke to the thin light filtering through the cheap blinds, and every night I drifted into a restless sleep on a borrowed mattress. The betrayal was a constant heavy weight, a phantom limb that ached with unrelenting soreness. At work, I went through the motions, my movements automatic. My colleagues, usually boisterous, treaded lightly around me. Major Thompson, a man who rarely spoke of anything beyond tactical maneuvers, pulled me aside after a briefing. "Everything all right, Miller?" he asked, his gaze surprisingly gentle. "You seem a little distant." I mumbled something about personal matters, the words feeling like ash in my mouth. News of the separation, like wildfire in dry grass, spread quickly. Whispers reached me through mutual friends, through the hushed tones of concerned battalion members. Brenda's family, who had once welcomed me so warmly, now fractured into factions. Some offered carefully worded sympathies. Others viewed me with suspicion, as if I were the one who had wronged her. My phone vibrated with Brenda's calls, her desperate texts. "Please, Kirk, just talk to me. Let me explain. I miss you. We can fix this." I ignored most of them. The words empty, meaningless. Sometimes late at night, a flicker of the old Brenda, the woman I loved, would tug at me, but it was quickly extinguished by the cold, hard memory of what I had seen. I met with a lawyer, a sharp, unsmiling woman named Ms. Davison. The discussions were clinical, devoid of emotion, yet each word felt like a fresh cut. Divorce proceedings, asset division, legal separation. The house, the shared investments, the careful financial planning for a future that no longer existed. It was all laid bare, reduced to numbers and clauses. The cold reality of it was almost as crushing as the betrayal itself. Rumors also started circulating about Dale Peterson, a quiet transfer, a demotion. His reputation among his SEAL peers, I heard, had taken a hit. A consequence of his actions, perhaps, but I felt no satisfaction from it, no sense of justice served, only a hollow ache in my chest. The damage was done, the foundations of my life irrevocably shattered, and Dale's downfall offered no balm. Connie, bless her steadfast heart, remained a constant. She'd bring me coffee, sit silently across from me, her presence a quiet comfort. She was genuinely remorseful for her initial silence, for not having pushed Brenda harder. "I should have done more, Kirk," she'd say, her voice thick with regret. "I really thought she was going to tell you." One evening, I returned to the apartment to find Brenda waiting for me. She was standing by my door, dressed in a familiar sweater, her face pale and drawn. She looked like a ghost of the woman I once knew. "Kirk," she said, her voice thin, a desperate plea. "Please, I just need you to hear me out. I know I messed up. I know I broke your heart. But we can fix this. Remember everything we had? All our plans? Please, give us another chance." Her eyes, swollen from crying, pleaded with me, reminding me of our past love, the shared dreams. I looked at her, truly looked at her. The pain in her eyes was genuine, a mirror of my own. But it was too late. The words that left my mouth were weary, heavy with resignation. "You broke every promise, Brenda. Every single one. You didn't just mess up. You planned it. You planned my humiliation in my own home while I was away doing my duty. How do you fix that?" The question hung in the air, unanswered. The truth was, she couldn't. The trust, once so solid, was gone, shattered beyond repair into a million irreparable pieces. The divorce proceedings began, a bureaucratic dance of paper and legal jargon that felt designed to be as painful as possible. Each document signed, each asset divided, chipped away another piece of the life Brenda and I had built, stripping it down to its bare, unfeeling components. It was a slow, agonizing process, each step a fresh reminder of the betrayal. I found myself increasingly isolated. Friends, unsure how to navigate the wreckage, offered platitudes or simply drifted away. At work, my focus wavered. Reports were late, my usual sharp insights dulled. Major Thompson called me into his office again, his concern evident. "Miller, you need to get your head straight. We depend on you." I nodded numbly, promising to do better, knowing it was an uphill battle. Brenda's reputation, once so carefully cultivated, took a hit in our small Midwestern social circle. The whispers, though never directly spoken to me, were unavoidable. Did you hear about Brenda? Or Dale Peterson was transferred. You know why? The judgment was palpable. Even some of her own family members, particularly the older aunts and uncles, openly expressed their disappointment. Such a shame, her Aunt Carol had said to Connie, loud enough for me to overhear at the grocery store. Brenda always was a bit flighty, but we never expected this. Dale Peterson surprisingly tried to reach out. An email, then a text message, proposing a meeting, an explanation, an apology. I deleted them without reading past the first line, my resolve firm. There was nothing he could say that would change anything. His words were as irrelevant as his presence had been unwanted. To cope with the relentless anger, grief, and confusion, I started seeing a therapist. Dr. Evans was a quiet, patient man who mostly listened, occasionally offering a gentle nudge. We talked about betrayal, about trust, about learning to breathe again. It was slow work, like sifting through broken glass, but it offered a sliver of release. I also threw myself into my work, trying to find purpose there, and found a strange solace in long, solitary runs through the crisp Midwestern air. The cold wind, a sharp, cleansing contrast to the turmoil within. Brenda, to her credit, made efforts to show genuine remorse. She didn't fight me on the divorce terms, making concessions that eased my financial burden, acknowledging her responsibility. Then one Tuesday, a letter arrived. Not a legal document, but a handwritten envelope, her familiar cursive on the front. Inside, a heartfelt apology. She acknowledged the depth of her mistake, the pain she had caused, her utter regret. She didn't ask for forgiveness, only for me to read it, to understand. I didn't respond. I couldn't. The words resonated, though, a quiet hum in the back of my mind. The bitterness was still too fresh, too raw. But the letter was a crack in the cold wall I had built, a tiny admission of her humanity, her own suffering. As the weeks turned into months, I started to see the toll the affair had taken on Brenda as well. The social isolation, the whispered judgments, the shame that clung to her. She looked thinner, her vibrant energy replaced by a weary resignation. It wasn't a triumphant feeling, merely an observation, a quiet recognition of mutual destruction. I grappled with the morality of my own anger, wondering if holding on to such bitterness was ultimately harming only myself. Could I ever truly move past it? The house, once our dream, the center of our future, was sold. The for sale sign went up, then came down a few weeks later. The tangible link to our life together was finally severed, leaving behind only the ghosts of what used to be. The divorce was finalized on a Tuesday, marked not by a dramatic court appearance, but by a dull phone call from Ms. Davison. A quiet, almost anticlimactic end to a decade-long relationship. The paperwork was done, the assets divided, the legal ties severed. I hung up the phone feeling a strange sense of emptiness, a hollow space where a life used to be. It was a freedom I hadn't asked for, a liberty born from wreckage, but also, I slowly realized, a chance to redefine myself. I buried myself in work. A new project landed on my desk, demanding long hours and intense focus, a complex logistical challenge for an upcoming overseas deployment. I embraced the grind, finding a strange solace in the tangible problem-solving, the clear objectives. It was a welcome distraction from the amorphous grief that still clung to me. Connie, ever thoughtful, gently nudged me back into some semblance of a social life. She arranged a casual get-together with a few mutual friends at a low-key pub downtown. She was careful to steer conversations away from anything that might upset me, deflecting questions about Brenda or my plans with practiced ease. I went stiff and awkward at first, but slowly, the familiar rhythm of conversation, the shared laughter, chipped away at my self-imposed isolation. The experience had changed me, though. I was more guarded, more observant, reading between the lines, always looking for the hidden currents. News traveled slowly but surely in our small town. I heard through the grapevine that Brenda had moved away, packed up her belongings, and sought a fresh start in a different state. The local gossip, I imagined, had become too much, a constant reminder of her actions. Dale Peterson's military career, too, had reportedly been impacted. The specifics were vague, but the whispers suggested he'd been disciplined, his path to advancement curtailed. It was a stark reminder that actions have consequences, not just the immediate emotional fallout, but lingering ripple effects on everyone involved, a price paid in reputation and opportunity. I reflected on the meaning of paying the price. It wasn't just about punishment. It was about the slow, agonizing unraveling of a life, the loss of trust, the quiet judgments that followed. Everyone involved in some way bore a scar. One weekend, needing a break from the apartment's quiet emptiness, I drove back to my childhood home. The familiar scent of wood smoke and damp earth, the worn armchair by the fireplace, the creak of the old staircase. They offered a peculiar comfort, a connection to a time before my heart was broken. My parents, their wisdom unburdened by judgment, offered quiet support. "Time heals, son," my dad had said, looking out at the autumn leaves, "but it leaves scars." My mother, always practical, made sure I had a warm meal and a clean bed. In the solitude of my new routine, I began to find a quiet strength. Learning to trust my own judgment again, to rely on myself became a daily practice. I started journaling, filling page after page with the emotional wreckage of the past year, trying to make sense of the complex interplay of love and betrayal. Writing it down, seeing the words on paper, helped to untangle the knotted threads of my feelings. The memory of Brenda still stung, a dull ache in a place that used to be vibrant. The raw, searing pain, however, began to recede, replaced by a more manageable, if persistent, throb. A year had passed since the Halloween party. My new apartment, once a temporary refuge, now felt like home. The walls, no longer bare, held framed photos of landscapes and a few new friends, faces unburdened by shared history. At work, my renewed focus hadn't gone unnoticed. A promotion had quietly affirmed my dedication, a testament to rebuilding. I could reflect on the events now, not with the searing bitterness that once consumed me, but with a somber, almost clinical understanding. Brenda's actions, devastating as they were, felt less like a personal affront and more like the tragic outcome of her own internal struggles. It didn't excuse them, but it offered a dimension of human fallibility beyond pure malice. Another letter arrived from Brenda, almost exactly a year after the first. It was brief, concise, no excuses or pleas, just a simple line: "I hope you have found peace." I read it, felt a familiar pang in my chest, a ghost of old emotions, but the desire to respond wasn't there. The chapter was closed. A few months later, I had a chance encounter with Dale Peterson in a hardware store in a nearby town. He looked older, wearier, the cocky smirk entirely absent from his face. Our eyes met across an aisle of paint samples. We exchanged a brief, uncomfortable nod, a silent acknowledgement of the wreckage we had all traversed, then turned away and moved on. I understood then that some wounds never fully disappear. They heal over, yes, but they leave a faint, permanent mark, a tender spot where the skin is thinner. I found new connections, new friends, but I carried the lesson of vigilance, the acute awareness of the fragility of trust. The sprawling Midwestern landscape, once a silent backdrop to my pain, slowly reclaimed its comforting familiarity, its quiet rhythms no longer mocking my turmoil. Paying the price, I realized, wasn't just for Brenda and Dale. It was for me too, in the form of a lost innocence, a heavy heart that now understood the world with sharper, more cynical eyes. The morality of it all, the choices made, the lines crossed, the slow, often agonizing path to consequence, was a complex tapestry. I found a quiet peace in the mundane, in the rhythm of my new life, a bittersweet realization that some stories don't end with grand gestures or explosive resolutions, but with the quiet, persistent resilience of moving on. Looking out at a quiet Midwestern sunset, the hues of red and orange painted across the sky offered a faint hope for a future, scarred but undeniably open to possibility.